Welcome, embodied ones. Welcome, remembering ones. What follows is not content. It is not commentary, diagnoses, or spiritual performance. It is a transmission on the profound collective malaise now revealing itself through humanity. This message is for those who can feel that much of what appears sudden is not sudden at all. It is for those beginning to recognize that what remains unprocessed does not remain contained. What the mind suppresses, the body may carry. What the individual refuses to face may enter the relationships, the family system, the culture, or the architecture of an entire life. And what humanity collectively normalizes may continue accumulating until concealment is no longer possible. This transmission is not being offered to blame anyone for illness, suffering, disability, or circumstances beyond their conscious control. Nor is it suggesting that every condition has a single emotional, spiritual, or energetic origin. The human body is sacred, infinitely complex, and worthy of appropriate care in every form that genuinely supports life. But compassion does not require us to deny pattern. Many have been carrying far too much for far too long. Unprocessed trauma, grief without sanctuary, inherited fear, chronic overfunctioning, the exhaustion of self-abandonment, the psychic cost of living against one's own truth, the corrosive residue of hatred, envy, addiction, projection, repression, and internal warfare. And many have continued appearing functional while the deeper structure quietly approached its threshold. This will not resonate with every field, nor is it meant to. Some may hear these words as confrontation. Others may recognize them as permission to finally stop pretending that what has been endured, consumed, repeated, suppressed, or enacted carries no consequence. So take only what opens something true within you. If this meets you as remembrance, receive it gently. If it creates discomfort, allow that discomfort to become private inquiry before public projection. Not every reaction requires expression. Sometimes the most transformative response is the willingness to remain still long enough for truth to complete its work within you. This transmission arrives not to condemn humanity, but to illuminate what can no longer be healed through avoidance. Because what is surfacing now is not merely evidence of collapse. It may also be the beginning of revelation. And with that, let us enter the field. We are absolutely living in a time of profound collective malaise, and it's expressing through many forms. For some, it appears as visible illness. For others, it appears as exhaustion without explanation, collapse after overfunctioning, emotional volatility, nervous system overwhelm, autoimmune conditions, heart conditions, cancers, chronic pain, despair, compulsive behavior, psychic fragmentation, or actions others quickly label as out of character. And much of what humanity calls sudden is not sudden at all. It's accumulated. It's delayed manifestation. It's the body, the field, or the life reaching a threshold where what has been carried can no longer remain hidden without consequence. Many have been carrying far too much for far too long. Some carry unprocessed trauma. Some carry grief that never found a safe place to land. Some carry ancestral distortion. Some carry the psychic cost of living against their own truth. Some carry the corrosive effects of envy, gossip, chronic judgment, lust without reverence, addiction, hatred, projection, fear, and the internal warfare of self-betrayal. And some carry all of this while still appearing functional. And that too must be understood, because the absence of visible proof is not the absence of suffering. Many are walking through life without language for what is already taking place within them. They are surviving on compensation, overexertion, performance, stimulants, numbing, dissociation, or self-silencing. And then one day, the body speaks more loudly than the personality can override. One day, the field collapses what the mind tried to maintain. One day, the life can no longer uphold the split. And from a multidimensional lens, illness is not only physical, it's often informational. The body is not merely tissue. It's memory, signal, and stored biography. It's chemistry, but also pattern. It's the place where lineage, environment, consciousness, suppression, and soul-level incongruence can converge into form. From a quantum lens, what is held repeatedly begins to organize matter. Thought alone is not the whole story, nor is emotion alone, but repeated states do condition the field. Chronic fear alters biology. Chronic resentment alters chemistry. Chronic shame alters posture, behavior, hormonal flow, immunity, and perception. Chronic self-silencing becomes energetic congestion. Living outside one's truth creates incoherence, and incoherence over time can become symptom. This does not mean every sick person caused their illness. That would be cruel, false, and spiritually immature. Physical dis-ease reveals that the embodied system is carrying some form of incongruence with the fullest intelligence of life, but it doesn't automatically reveal where that incongruence began, who is responsible for it, or what it means about the condition of the soul. Some illness comes through the conditions of incarnation itself, some through collective toxicity, environmental burden, inherited vulnerability, ancestral trauma, infection, injury, deprivation, chronic stress, or experiences endured before the being possessed any meaningful power of choice. Some through years spent in conditions the vessel was never designed to carry indefinitely. Some through mysteries and soul-level trajectories no observer can interpret from the surface. And yes, some dis-ease may deepen through repeated consent to distortion, when truth has become available and is continually refused. These distinctions matter. There's a difference between a body overwhelmed by what it survived and a being repeatedly choosing what corrodes their life. There's a difference between trauma-based fragmentation and devotion to distortion. There's a difference between illness carried in innocence and incoherence continually reinforced through conscious action. Both require compassion. Both require discernment, but they are not spiritually identical. A person may be profoundly ill while their soul remains luminous. A child may enter a suffering body without ever having betrayed spirit. A survivor may carry physical consequences from what others imposed upon them. A being may live with disability, chronic pain, or bodily limitation while embodying extraordinary truth. And the reverse is also possible. A person may appear physically healthy, strong, attractive, and successful while existing in severe spiritual incongruence. The body is not a simple moral ledger. Health is not proof of purity. Illness is not proof of corruption. Yet neither is the body separate from the life being lived. Humanity has normalized conditions no living system was designed to carry indefinitely. Overdrive, disembodiment, environmental toxicity, economic strain, emotional suppression, addiction renamed coping, gossip mistaken for bonding, envy renamed ambition, projection mistaken for discernment, self-abandonment praised as responsibility. What is common is not necessarily natural. What is widespread is not necessarily coherent. And the body knows, the field knows, the soul knows, and eventually, what remains unprocessed seeks expression. What is continually denied demands acknowledgement. This does not mean every symptom has one identifiable spiritual cause. It means the embodied system is communicative. The body carries what the conscious mind has not yet been able to name. What cannot find language begins speaking through another form. Sometimes through mental anguish, relational destruction, or compulsive behavior. Sometimes through exhaustion so profound that the personality can no longer override it. Sometimes through a life that grows so constricted that the being is finally forced to encounter what has been avoided. Sometimes through inflammation, chronic pain, nervous system collapse, immune dysregulation, or the gradual narrowing of physical capacity. And sometimes through addiction becoming increasingly destructive. It may reveal that something within the whole ecology of the being, physical, emotional, environmental, relational, ancestral, energetic, or spiritual, requires care, protection, release, or reorganization. There are also conditions of consciousness that spread through a life like disease. Resentment can contaminate every relationship. Hatred can reproduce itself until no encounter remains untouched. Addiction can consume freedom, intimacy, health, trust, and purpose. Chronic self-betrayal can gradually diminish the being's capacity to recognize themselves. Envy can make another person's beauty feel like an assault. Unprocessed shame can cause someone to crave love while continually repelling it. These are not merely metaphors without embodied consequence. Physical dis-ease reveals that some form of distortion, burden, or incongruence is present within or acting upon the vessel, whether inherited, imposed, unconsciously repeated, or knowingly sustained. What it does not reveal by itself is the origin of that distortion, or the spiritual condition of the one carrying it. The deeper truth is, what continually consumes consciousness will shape the experience of life. Because what remains unaddressed never remains contained. It leaks into perception, behavior, relationships, choices, the body, and the atmosphere surrounding the being. Most simply learn to normalize, conceal, or rename the evidence until it becomes too painful, too visible, or too consequential to deny. The deeper truth is, what continually consumes consciousness will eventually shape the experience and the form of life. It may affect the mind, the body, and relationships. It may move through the family system. It may shape what the next generation is asked to carry. Healing, then, cannot be reduced to symptom suppression, forced positivity, or denial. Medicine may be sacred. Treatment may be sacred. Rest, surgery, nourishment, movement, touch, community, prayer, grief, boundaries, and environmental change may all become part of the field through which restoration arrives. The divine is not absent from material care, and spirit does not require us to reject the physical means through which support may come. Healing is movement toward coherence. It's truth-telling. It's grieving what was never safely grieved. It's nervous system repair. It's receiving care without shame. It's leaving relationships and environments that keep the body braced and the soul diminished. It's ending loyalty to what repeatedly harms. It's no longer performing wellness while dying inwardly. It's allowing the divine into the places the personality could not force into repair. And as force releases, what is original is finally given room to emerge. Authenticity does not arise from calling oneself authentic. It emerges as survival adaptations soften and the original self is given enough safety to appear without being punished, hurried, mocked, exploited, or recruited back into falsehood. And this must also be said. Divine surrender is not always an instant cure. Surrender is not a transaction in which one performs faith correctly and is therefore owed physical restoration. For some, surrender opens a path of recovery. For some, it accompanies remission, stabilization, restored capacity, or radical reordering. For some, healing unfolds gradually across years. For some, the body remains limited while the being becomes inwardly freer than ever before. For some, healing means the end of internal warfare rather than the end of every symptom. And for some, the soul eventually completes its passage through this form. No one observing from the outside has the authority to declare why one person recovers while another doesn't. Continued illness is not proof of insufficient faith, failed surrender, spiritual impurity, or unwillingness to heal. The mysteries of embodiment are greater than any formula the human mind can impose upon them. Death, too, need not be spoken of through terror alone. From the spiritual lens, it is not annihilation. It's transition, a change in form, a movement of consciousness beyond the range currently available to physical perception. This does not make grief less devastating. It simply means loss may be both unbearable and holy. And still, many will heal, not because they were more deserving, more deeply loved, or more accomplished in the performance of spirituality, but because healing became possible through a convergence of conditions no single observer could fully calculate. They became available to truth, available to care, to release, to support, to love stronger than the defenses once required for survival. And that is the deeper invitation now. Not fear, blame, nor spiritual vanity, nor the presumption that we can diagnose another person's soul by looking at their body, but sober remembrance. What are you carrying that the body should not have to hold alone? What grief was never witnessed? What truth has been delayed? What environment keeps your system in defense? What bond repeatedly asks you to abandon yourself? What adaptation have you mistaken for personality? What addiction have you renamed comfort? What judgment have you normalized as discernment? What fear has become so familiar that you call it yourself? The hour is asking for honesty, because many conditions do not truly appear out of nowhere. The final manifestation may seem sudden, but the field may have been speaking for years. Through fatigue, contraction, numbness, recurring pain, emotional volatility, and through the persistent knowing that something is no longer sustainable. The body often whispers before it cries out, and the soul often signals before the structure collapses. Healing begins when we stop treating those signals as inconvenience and begin receiving them as communication. May those who are sick be met with immense compassion. May those carrying invisible burdens be believed. May those collapsing be understood not as failures, but as beings whose systems can no longer maintain what was never sustainable. May those wounded in innocence be released from every implication that their suffering reflects spiritual deficiency. May those repeatedly choosing distortion awaken before consequence deepens. May those who have caused harm find the courage to meet truth without fleeing into denial or projection. May those who can heal be led toward the care, conditions, courage, and surrender that make restoration possible. May those whose bodies remain limited know that embodiment is not measured by physical perfection. May those who pass be received in mercy. May those who grieve be held without being hurried toward meaning. And may humanity remember, the body is not separate from the soul. The soul is not untouched by the life being lived. Dis-ease reveals that something within the embodied ecology requires attention, but it does not give us permission to condemn, simplify, or presume. May we become reverent enough to listen, humble enough to not claim certainty over another being's suffering, courageous enough to change what can be changed, tender enough to care for what cannot yet be changed, and willing enough to return again and again to the coherence from which life knows how to reorganize. Once embodiment is understood as a continual series of micro-adjustments, another truth becomes visible. What we repeatedly think, suppress, consume, tolerate, and enact does not simply disappear because its consequences are not immediate. Repetition becomes pattern. Pattern becomes atmosphere. Atmosphere conditions the nervous system. And what remains unresolved long enough will eventually seek expression through the body, the relationships, the mind, or the architecture of one's life. This is part of the profound collective malaise now revealing itself through humanity. The divine is asking this to be spoken now, not to create fear, assign blame, or invite public judgment, but because many are reaching thresholds where continued avoidance is no longer merciful. What has been normalized must first become visible before it can be consciously released, reorganized, or healed. This transmission is therefore an invitation into honest inward examination. Should anything within it create resistance, discomfort, defensiveness, or dissonance, allow that response to become a doorway rather than a weapon. Sit with what arose before immediately deciding where else it belongs. Ask, what in me felt seen? What in me felt threatened? What truth might be asking for greater attention? What am I tempted to project outward rather than meet inwardly? Private reflection is often far more transformative than public projection. Projection disperses the energy of revelation by assigning it elsewhere. Reflection gathers that energy back into the only place where true change can begin. Not everything that activates us is true, but every activation can reveal something worthy of conscious attention. Take only what opens in resonance. Meet what unsettles you with discernment, and allow the rest to pass without needing to diminish, attack, or distort what another may be ready to receive. The purpose is not exposure, it's return. And so, may what has been revealed here not become another source of fear, self-surveillance, or spiritual perfectionism. May it become permission to listen more closely, to notice what the body has been communicating beneath the noise, to recognize where the nervous system has been asked to normalize what was never truly nourishing, to release what no longer belongs in the inner atmosphere, and to make the smallest available adjustment toward greater truth, coherence, and life. Healing does not always begin through a dramatic awakening. Sometimes it begins when we stop overriding the quiet no, when we finally honor the need for rest, when we tell the truth without weaponizing it, when we withdraw our attention from what continually distorts us, when we choose repair over repetition, when we become willing to meet with compassion what we once survived through avoidance. No one is being asked to heal everything at once. The invitation is simply to become more conscious of what is being rehearsed within you, and therefore what is being strengthened through you. Because every interruption of an inherited pattern creates space for another possibility. Every moment of honest reflection weakens the architecture of unconscious repetition. Every act of repair alters what can be passed forward. Every return to the body restores a measure of inner authority. And every loving, coherent choice becomes part of the medicine entering the collective field. The malaise is collective, but so is the return. As each being becomes more willing to see clearly, feel honestly, choose consciously, and live in greater integrity, humanity's atmosphere begins to change from within. May what has reached its threshold be met before it must become devastation. May what is surfacing be received not only as evidence of what has gone wrong, but as intelligence revealing where life is asking to be restored. May the body no longer be forced to scream what the soul has been whispering. May the mind become spacious enough to recognize truth without collapsing into shame. May the heart remain tender enough to choose compassion without abandoning discernment. And may each of us become increasingly faithful to the small, sacred adjustments through which an entirely different world is formed. The purpose was never condemnation. The purpose is remembrance. The purpose is reorganization. The purpose is return. Ashe. Amen. Selah.